because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Laura.
And I'm Justin.
Today we are delving into our repressed issues and talking about the Babadook. We're joined today by Libby Hill. Libby is an awards reporter at The Wrap, and you can read some of her previous work at the New York Times, NPR, Vulture, AV Club, Salon, and RogerEbert.com. Welcome to Cows in the Field, Libby.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Very excited to have you.
And I believe that this movie was suggested via your wife, but as your suggestion. So we wanted to just kick off, as we often do, to ask, like, what is your relationship with this film, Libby, and how, if at all, has it changed now that you are expecting a child, now that you are with child?
Now that I've become the vessel. Yes, it's wild because I had a vague conception of how I felt about this film, and then I rewatched it. But originally, I thought it was and not that this has changed, but I found it to be an incredibly emotional and also one of the scariest horror movies I've ever seen, but not for any of the usual reasons. And what stuck with me is sort of what the Babadook represents to a viewer, let's say, because there are a lot of things that people will put on it, but for me, who has struggled my entire life with mental illness, with specifically depression, I saw very clear-eyedly my depression playing out on screen and my worst fears coming to life, that you know that all of the worst things about myself, all the things I liked about myself least, could manifest in a way that did true harm to someone else. So I always thought this movie was very smart about all that. Really resonated with me. And then I rewatched it and I've made a horrible mistake. So yeah, that was my feeling. Rewatching it was one of the most harrowing experiences I've gone through. No, but good, but just that's a testament to how good the film is. But those fears are so much more palpable now because my depression hasn't gone away. It doesn't go away, which is why I think the film was so powerful, and I'll talk about that later. But I'm about 6 weeks out. I'm in that crunch time of like, this is happening. And even though I've thought about it for 40 years, I clearly have not thought about it enough. And the ramifications are setting
think about
in.
it enough. Right?
No, exactly.
There's no way.
Exactly. So the ramifications have set in. And Emily was gone. And my wife was gone on a trip. And I was just me and the cats watching it like too late at night. And I was just like, I'm having a bad time. I'm having a bad time.
Yeah.
Because of how good the film was.
Yeah. And I think too, like if you've had a history with struggling with depression, and even if you are a mother who hasn't, pregnancy and birth are all intermingled with depression and anxiety, right? Like if it's not, I feel like people know most about postpartum depression, but there's postpartum anxiety, right? Where you cannot stop worrying that the baby is going to die in an insane way. And there's also, pregnancy depression. Like your hormones are going all over the place. And even if you all didn't struggle with depression before, you're gonna. Like, I don't think I know a single mother who hasn't struggled with this in some way, shape, or form during the pregnancy, after the pregnancy. It's like it's a piece with the experience.
And in that sense, I felt like I had an advantage because I know what depression looks like.
Yeah.
I know the warning signs in myself.
Yeah.
I was better prepared for it. I have built up more calluses to depression than I think a lot of poor moms who just get hammered by it after, assuming this was going to be the greatest moment of their life, their greatest challenge, most fulfilling, and then they're all they followed with is existential dread. It messes people up for good reason.
And Libby, you talked about like the power of the film to evoke this, and I do think that it is very powerful in partly because the Babadook itself is so sort of abstract, so it allows people who are dealing with different sort of types of mental. You could say mental illness, but you could also just say just different types of maladies to like read that into the Babadook, because like I feel like at times the main character Amelia is like she's she's very, I mean, she's, I think, clearly depressed, but she's also suffering from, I think, a kind of anxiety, right? So I was seeing a lot of the anxiety in her character, but she's also sort of just suffering from a general malaise. You could also just read it as a kind of, she's suffering from just a purely physical malaise because she's so tired all the time, right? Despite the fact that she's, she does sleep, she sort of sleeps a lot and she's never really getting any rest. And, that is a kind of infirmity, like being sort of bedbound, right? That, and there's that feeling like if you, I mean, we're all like, going back out in the world now and getting sick for the first time in 3 years, being like, oh man, I forgot what it felt like to be sick. And that feeling of just like, you're like overcome with the sort of exhaustion. And it's for me, in my experience, there's a mental component to that as well. And it is very similar to the kind of fear and anxiety that I might experience in a more acute way if I'm dealing with some stressor. It's that same kind of, it's a strange cloud that sort of for me at least, that hangs over my head. And what I like about in the film how it's represented is visually is like the Babadook is like this dark enveloping cloud that sort of like looms over her when she's in her bed. Anyway, I find that very evocative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Babadook is great for so many reasons. One, it's sort of an atmosphere that consumes the house, like that cloud over your head, like that sort of fog, and it's also just the dark. It's just and there's so many classical. There's a reason we fear the dark, which is also a very basic metaphor for a lot of the tough feelings that we have. But yeah, I think it's so malleable. It's her grief, it's her anxiety, it's her exhaustion. And of course she's anxious. Like, why wouldn't she be? Like,
Yeah.
what a traumatic experience she
Yeah.
goes through on the precipice of the other like most traumatic experience you kind of
Yes.
go through. It's a double shot, and I don't blame her for being messed up. And from what I understand, then going from that into caring for a small child by yourself when you thought you were doing this with a partner, also trying to grieve that partner and never really getting it all done. So you're in
Mhm.
this state of broken stasis is I don't know. And I think that's so powerful in the film because as awfully as Amelia acts, I I, I can't blame her. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't find it in me. Like
Yeah.
that kid is so annoying.
Yeah.
Um
Totally.
I wait as long as possible. I always wait as long as possible to break that out. But like I'm always shocked. And again, I think it's a testament to the film that he's just something that gets under your skin like yeah, it's sand in a wound.
The other thing that is like that he says to her, just talking about the trauma and then the sort of future directedness of that and the what that like portends for her is, he's like, the Babadook is going to kill us, right? At some point or whatever. He's like, he's worried. And she's like, I will protect you. You won't die. And he's like, well, did you think the same thing about dad right before he died? And she has to say, I mean, in her mind, she has to be like, well, yeah, of course. But like, that's like one of those most like destabilizing things where, it just shows like, yeah, I guess I don't know, I have to in a way admit that I don't know. And all I can do is sort of do my best in this moment. But like, that's really terrifying, right? And like, the
Mhm.
kid has identified something absolutely terrifying that she has to confront. and at the same time reassure him
Right.
because he's confronting it too. And it's sort of her job to reassure him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's her job to not be honest in that
Yeah.
moment. But that's
What
a
a
hard line to
dick,
walk.
though.
Dick
Like
move, Samuel.
like, yeah, basically these children, they're so guileless and they're just explaining the world as they see it, but also like, oh my God. Like I just looked at him like, that's so insensitive.
Yeah.
That's how I know my brain is not like calibrated for parenthood quite yet, like completely. I was just like, that is so rude. Like, I can't believe you would say that to me, but your mother. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, don't you understand? I'm trying to reassure you here. You're not playing the right game. Well, Libby, let me ask you this. So one of the things I found in the movie is that it's almost changes perspectives partway through. So the first half, you're taking her perspective, and he's this annoying little demon. He's getting under your skin, as you put sand in the wound and all that. But then it does, for me at least. I'm curious if you agree with this. Is that it sort of switches, and then it becomes his perspective, and she becomes an antagonist, right? She becomes this, demonic figure who's possessed by the Babadook, and who's like trying to she kills the dog, and then she's coming after him, and all the things he was doing in the first part, where you're thinking, okay, he's gonna fight the Babadook, end up being used to fight off her as she comes. And I think so for me that like there's this weird sort of switch over that happens, which I think is one of the coolest things in the movie, and it only really works, to your point, that because she's portrayed really sympathetically in the first part. And so when she becomes the villain in a way in the second part, you don't like lose that sympathy. You're sort of just like, you feel conflicted, because at the same time you're like, this is bad, but also like I know where she's coming from because I got the first part, and then there's a kind of resolution at the end. But I don't know if that also resonated with you.
It didn't. Well, that is absolutely what happens in the film. That is not that. One of my problems is that I relate too strongly to Amelia,
Interesting.
so I didn't switch. I don't switch with it. I switch, and now I'm the villain. And now I have lost, and which is why it was such a disturbing rewatch for me. Is like I have lost control.
Yeah.
And this is what it feels like when when all of the rage, or all of the all of the evil that you fear you carry inside of you manifests. It's very upsetting to overly identify with the lead of the Babadook, but
I did
but
too.
it's just I spent a lot of time thinking the worst things about myself, and this film was so good at keying in on those fears, and making them real, like. And with my experiences with mental illness, I haven't done them, but I've spent time thinking about them, and I felt exposed and dirty and both seen, but in the worst possible way you would ever want to be seen. And so there's that switch where you are able to clearly see, this has been a manifestation a long time coming, and it's not just this child being obstinate. Um, but I'm still so annoyed by him. Oh my God. Like at the pivotal moment when he's like stroking her cheeks, I'm just like, can you just lay off?
Like, don't
you just
touch
have
her.
to touch me all the time. I have ADHD. I'm a little worried about getting touched out. Just say it. That's the cats
being touched out is an absolute thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And mom rage is a thing too. I did not, maybe Justin, you can like say if you don't think this is right, but I wasn't a very angry person. And I've had like the most rage that I've ever had in my life postpartum. I don't know if it's like hormones or if it's just like, kids are annoying.
There's something annoying. It's very, they can be incredibly annoying. Yeah.
And you're like running on less sleep, and like I absolutely, Libby, felt a tightness in my stomach and like a lurching feeling watching Amelia become the Babadook and yell at her son and do these things where I was like, I've totally been there, like I have not yet, like, I have not strangled a dog, but like I have yelled at my kid. Absolutely. I read all the parenting books. I read all the gentle parenting books.
Oh yeah.
And I do everything I can. But then sometimes, I walked out of a room one day to take a breath because I was going to lose my mind. And, my son came in, ran after me and screamed in my ear, "No breathing, mama!" Like sometimes it'd be like that.
Yeah.
And, but he is also an innocent and needs
Oh
me.
yeah.
And I, fuck up and yell or lose my temper or act in a way that I don't want to be. And, you of course, like you can always repair, but still that moment is there. It's there in your memory. You worry it's there in his memory, and like, now I'm like, trying to like hand him ice cream, being
Yeah.
like, "Are we cool? Are we cool? I'm sorry about that time. Are we cool?"
Don't remember this.
Yeah.
Don't remember this. Don't remember this.
Like, when do you
Where's
start
ice
forming
cream?
memories? Oh my God.
Oh God.
Like,
Yeah.
Emily
it's-
claims she has them from like super young, and I was like, you better fucking not have any memories from, like, I need a couple. I need a dry run to make sure that nothing.
It's so
that
much pressure,
minimum
though.
screw
You
ups. Oh, I
cannot be
know.
perfect
It's
all
sort
the
of-
time. You cannot be like the model Janet Lansbury gentle parenting all the
Yeah.
time. You will go insane.
Well, it's like having to perform a role of caregiver constantly.
Yeah.
And with
Right.
where the stakes seem to be, existential in the sense that you're like, I'm worried that if I yell at my kid, like at one point, right, she just yells like,
I need to sleep.
I'm sorry, Mommy. I was just really hungry.
If you're that hungry, why don't you go and eat shit?
do you say something like that? And
That
you're
you
just
can't
like,
take that back.
holy crap. Yeah, you can't take it back, first of all. And you're also like, but it is what you're feeling in that moment, right? But it's just like one slip. And then you feel like, oh, that one slip, it's like everything,
You feel like defined by that
yeah,
moment
exactly.
and not the 100 million other moments.
Yeah.
I started therapy with my current therapist like 6-7 years ago, because I had blown up another friendship by holding in all my rage, and then one day they just did something and I couldn't, and so I just unloaded all of the things that had been bothering me in the most nuclear wave possible and just like blew it up from space, which is unfortunately was my conflict style for a long time. So I've spent this last 7 years working on diffusing that bomb, but also I know it's there. Like and it feels like, I have the nuclear suitcase hidden in my basement somewhere with the Babadook. So yeah, a lot of those were very, terrifying.
Well,
But you're ahead of the game then, is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing, Libby, just so you know. Because, like, I mean, I didn't work on a lot of stuff before I had babies. I was sort of like, I honestly was like, when I have a kid, like, that will just solve me, right? Like,
right. That's true.
and
You
then
did
I
think that.
I did do that.
Yeah.
That was a problem. And then now I'm like with a newborn and I'm like, oh, this didn't solve my problems. And in fact, like I have a lot of stuff to work through. And now like now I need to find a therapist and do the work and like be the person I want to be for my kid. And now I have a better reason. If it wasn't good enough for me to like work on myself, now I have a better reason to do it. But that's not the time to start, ideally. So
It isn't.
I mean, it's
But,
always
like-
time to start.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
the last 9 months has been all like, what have I been doing in therapy? I haven't been doing shit. Like, it's just like I don't know what I was messing around with, but it definitely wasn't getting me prepared for this moment. And I mean, that's a lie, but like there's just once you start digging, there's just a lot of stuff down there that could use reorganizing.
so many
Um,
Babadooks.
So yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
just
so,
to jump to the ending. I mean,
Mhm.
there's of course this idea that the Babadook is something we have to live with. That's like our depression or our anxiety or whatever. But it's also the burden, the accumulated burden of micro resentments and things that we get over time with our relationships, and in familial relationships those are the most complex because those are the ones you're engaged with the most and they're the highest stakes, right? And so
They
are these
also
things
get more complicated with
they
family.
get more complex, exactly. And so these are things that are always going to be there, right? That's the thing, is it's like there's the the movie ends with this like there's not real you don't like just now it's a happy family. It's like no, there'll always be this kind of threat in a way. The nuclear suitcase, as you said, Libby, in the in the basement.
Well, it's like you were both saying, like, she said things and did things in those moments, Babadook or no, that, like, Samuel isn't gonna forget about them. Like,
Mhm.
you're not telling me when he's 17, he is gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, well, remember when you tried to murder me? Remember when you killed my dog?" Like, that feels like something that will come up in family therapy down the
Yeah.
road.
Probably.
So there's that. So there's that. They're not, and I love that. And but also it is very representative across whatever you think the Babadook represents, with that idea that you have to learn to coexist
Yeah.
with things. These grief doesn't go away. It might get smaller, it might get contained, but it's always with you in some form. Depression, if you are if it is recurring, um, as opposed to situational, depression doesn't leave you. It it has, it's like a sine wave. It's up and down, but it's down there, and it needs care and maintenance too.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean like supporting it and having to keep it around. It's just the clear-eyed thought that this is what it is. Like my life is never going to be all sunshine. My basement isn't ever going to be all clean from dangerous objects or threats.
Yeah.
It's just how I react to them and how I maintain them and how I take care around them, and ultimately how I stop fearing them, because the fear is what powers them a lot
Yeah.
of the time, and drives you into more desperate positions.
And if there is like an arc to the film, it's not that they beat the Babadook, right? It's that they accept it, right? So the difference is what has been going on presumably for the last 7 years or 8 years. I don't know how old Samuel is for in Amelia's life. Is she's been repressing this horrible trauma and refusing to engage with it, acknowledge it, ask for help from anyone. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about her in her relation to her neighbor, her coworker, her sister, people who at times are willing to help, but also have a somewhat fraught relationship with her. And she's sort of unwilling to, share that challenge that she's been going through with them. And as a result, because she just thinks if I can ignore it, maybe it'll go away.
Yeah.
And like, if there's anything every one of us has learned in therapy, anyone who's been in therapy has learned, it's like ignoring it will make it worse.
Yeah,
Like that
that's
is
no good.
exactly the wrong thing. You can't do that. You have to sort of face it which is so counterintuitive because when you're in for me at least, it's mostly been anxiety. But when I'm in an anxious state, the last thing I want to do is face it head on. I mean, the thing I only want to do is run away. Like that's the immediate impulse, is just run the opposite direction, just try to take my mind off of it. And in fact, actually, that was what I was told, like by various people early in my life when I would face, like, they just be like, oh, just don't think about it. Like that's like a very
Mhm.
like person who hasn't been in therapy.
Person who does not have anxiety.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. Well, maybe
Like
they
if they-
have, but they just haven't learned to process it in these ways. And I think, so then it just gets bigger and bigger, and then eventually you find a children's book on your shelf, and your life is turned upside down.
That you obviously made, which is like a whole other, you know.
Wait, so you?
Oh, I make children's books on the side. Oh, okay. Yes, there's this magical book that shows up in your house.
So wait,
know.
that's
I
your
know how it gets there.
so your theory is that she sort of in a fugue state has made the Babadook book.
I mean, I haven't thought that much about it, but like the fact that comes up, or I'm a writer and I've done some, writing for magazines and
I
also
see.
some children's books. I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
like,
I didn't clock that actually, but that's good. That is good. Yeah.
No.
I mean, in those
Amelia.
fugue states where she's asleep, but
Yeah.
she doesn't sleep, and she's up watching those incredible like old movies which is such a great visual.
Yeah, she's being
Yeah, so
inspired
that
by
was
the
always
German expressionism she's watching. She's then just like, oh,
exactly,
I got this great idea for a children's book.
exactly. And those pop-ups are messed up. Like,
Mhm.
she's obviously very good at what she does.
She's
She
very
should really get
talented.
back into that.
Yeah,
I know.
seriously. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess I get this lady on with HarperCollins or something.
I know
Yeah,
the
right.
book is. I mean, it's obviously horrifying, but it's also so beautiful.
Very
Like the
pretty.
scene where when they do the close up on when the Amelia
Oh
character
my
slits
god,
her throat,
yeah.
and you can see that it's like the grain of the red ribbon coming
Mhm.
out of her neck. It's beautiful and also, whew,
Oh my god,
Little
yes.
spooky.
little spooky,
Little
Yeah.
spooky.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I like what my favorite one
What's
was
your
when
favorite one?
she's wringing the neck of the dog, and the thing as you like pull it, it goes back and forth. Right? Like the little puppet moves back and forth as she like turned the. I was like, wow, that's really cool. It looks really looks real.
I know.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. I do love the dog. I obviously hate it when animals get it, but also I love that idea that in case you can't get on board with the kid, in case you absolutely can't get there, she kills a dog.
Yeah.
Like, guys, it's serious.
Yeah.
I just think that was smart. Like, not all people are about kids.
That's
And
right.
I get that, but
You've got the
most people
antinatalists out
are
there.
about dogs.
That's right. Yeah,
Oh
there's the
gosh, yeah.
antinatalist position. They're like, no kids allowed.
okay.
But
Antinatalist is not about murdering kids.
no, but they're not about having kids. So that I don't know if
Yeah,
they feel
some of
like,
okay
are,
because we need to
right.
get Tina
some
on.
of them are.
And
Yeah, you needed. I think that if it was to fully round it out, then I think they needed a cat too. But just personally,
just in case you're not a dog person.
yeah,
Jeff.
just in case you're not a dog person, then you cover all your bases. You get a cat, and
then a hamster.
yeah.
She's just going through a
At
pet
some
store.
point, it's like the woman who swallowed a fly here.
yeah,
So yeah, they just had to go with one.
yeah, that makes sense. No,
That
that's a
fit
good
the
call.
like theme of the kind of black and white and gray. It's very. I love the production design of this film. I love the practical effects they used for the Babadook. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just great.
Also, that house. I was, I was thinking it's a pretty cool house. I mean, I would have. I don't know what her husband. Do we know actually what her husband
He
did?
was a
Oh, he was a musician. Okay,
Musician,
yeah.
Musician.
Probably quite successful. I would imagine having the large house that he had.
Although it's so bare.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, she's removed everything that looks like him or reminds her of
Right.
him, and hasn't replaced it because she's not really living.
yeah,
So
she could use a better TV. I would say that. That was.
yeah,
Like you're with like a
Maybe a-
cathode ray TV or whatever. It's
yeah,
For
Get a
watching her
flat
silent
screen.
movies, it's fine.
yeah, exactly. Some films have color now. It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Maybe that's what they had like on Australian public access TV. It's
Don't
just
be
they were
rude.
replaying old films. I don't know. So I mean, we've talked a little bit about like the allegory of the Babadook. I mean, do you also think? I mean, they make this sort of explicit, but I guess I don't know. The Babadook is sort of a representation also of her husband, and there's this kind of like deliver the child to me that he says, where it's like sort of if you just kill the child, maybe like I will release you. So there's this kind of you could read it in different ways actually. I mean, one is like she obviously wants to kill her child because she thinks of him as the source of her problems. But then the other thing is
Right.
that she's like maybe as in these depressive episodes she's just like this whole world sucks, like let's all be together in the somewhere else, like with
Mhm.
my husband. So there's a kind of like let's just cross over together. Anyway, I wasn't totally sure. I mean, it's also interesting like the way he's styled. So the husband doesn't dress like that, but the Babadook does. So I wasn't totally sure. Maybe it's just because she's watching all these German expressionist films, but I wasn't totally sure also like what the significance of sort of styling him as a gay icon, styling him in that way was. But yeah.
It was. I did some reading last night, and Jennifer Kent said it was very much based on those German expressionist films, the early films of and they wanted something looming and dark and just something creepy, and they made it with like stop motion. Like it was just
Oh, cool.
very it was stylized for a reason. And then I think, when she sees her husband, it's at that point that she's just that's it's I mean, if she is the monster and she has created the monster, then that is the monster trying to manipulate her into doing whatever it is she wants or needs to do anyway. And I suppose clarifying for the audience that she's gone, like
Mm.
it's over, like because her dead husband's there and she's talking to him. But yeah, I don't know. You had mentioned before we started recording, talking about her support system, such as Amelia's support system, such as it was.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting because I want to say that they suck. I want to say that they're a bad support system. But also, I've been on the other side of that where you are constantly you're trying for 7 years to help someone and they will not accept help
Mhm.
and they will not see how they're drowning and they won't they want you to pretend with them. And when you love someone, when you really care about someone, pretending they're okay when they're not okay is devastating to have to do.
Mm.
How did you both feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes when you're in that like depression or that hole or wherever that dark place Amelia is, you think like nobody in the world could possibly understand or want to hear about it, and that you're totally alone in that feeling. But like, I mean, I don't know. Mrs. Roach is older. She's living by herself. She probably has lost a partner. Maybe not in the exact horrible, traumatic way that Amelia did, but she's lost somebody she cared about. I'm going to assume she might have just been, but she might have been a solo lady her whole life. But, you know, I think like, I think there are, you just don't even see that there are other people who have gone through pain as well and might be there to understand yours and may actually have some insight as well. I mean, she treats Mrs. Roach like, I have to take care of you. No, 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 I'm going to take out your trash.
Right.
She's locked herself into that caretaker role even though it's killing her, and she can't accept any help. But I don't know, her sister, that is an interesting, that's very empathetic reading Libby of like maybe her sister has been trying for 7 years and is like kind of at her wit's end too, for what to do about
I
it.
mean,
By the
her
time we
sister
get to
also
there,
sucks.
she sucks. Yeah.
Sucks 110%.
I,
Absolutely. I was trying well, when you asked that question, I was like trying to be like, my gut was, I don't know, they all suck. But then I was like, okay, let's be fair. Let's take a step back. Let's look at it. There are people who are trying. There are people who are still trying
Yeah.
7 years later. And again, this is just another reason it speaks to my using the film as a depression allegory is because I cannot accept help. Like I cannot. I'm very upset that we're having a baby shower because I'm like, no, I don't want people to think of me. I don't want people to express their excitement for me. That feels like
Mm.
asking for too much
Mm.
from
Mhm.
people. And I cannot ask for help because the depression says I'm not worth it. And so I need to handle it by myself. And further, I need to focus on taking care of other people
Yeah.
when I should be taking care of myself, which is definitely what Amelia is doing. Amelia
Yeah.
is just fine. So fine. In fact, she can give all of her energy and time to caring for other people when clearly her tank has been empty since I don't even know how. I honestly don't know how she made it in that job so long because uh she's in a bad way. It's a bad play. It's a bad deal. And honestly, I don't know how she's lasted the last 7 years.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a Babadook prequel just to be like, how did we get here, folks?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my
well,
gosh.
what happened?
Even just the littlest things where she hands that tea with the milk and the lady's just like, I don't want milk. And I'm like, man, I go through that 10
Well,
times a day right now. Like, I know how that feels where you're just like, Certainly, I will get you a new one.
Yeah, no, it is that part of the film resonated a lot with me. Just being just the feeling of being trapped in a caregiver role, and I do think she's really like it feels like you're trapped because her job is to care for old people who don't
Mhm.
appreciate her because maybe they can't, or maybe they just refuse to,
Right.
and then to care for a young person who can't appreciate her either. So she's like,
Right.
it's not like she's caring for people who are grateful for her help. She's like caring for, she gets nothing in return from this. It's purely like duty bound.
I know. And
And
Samuel, even when he's like grateful or like not, yelling at her, he's like, I don't want you to die, which is like its own horrible neediness, which is, it's not like I hate you, mom, but it's like I'm so scared you're gonna die, which is just like the largest
Yeah.
guilt trip and anxiety thing. And you're just like, ugh, get off my body.
Yeah.
Go away,
It's just like
Samuel.
it's just like I can't imagine. Like, it's one thing for a child to be scared of monsters, but then to also be screaming, "Yeah, it's gonna fuck you up." Like it's just like me. What did I do?
yeah,
Like, this is your fear. Leave me out of it. I just work here, sir. Like, this is a Wendy's. No. But I mean, yeah, and then her job puts her in a position where she can't see that Mrs. Roach can and would love to help her
yeah,
to just make her some tea, to make her some dinner. Uh, it's just she is just fixated on her understanding of how the world is, how the world works, how she's a cog inside of it, and how nothing could ever get better. So she's not going to try. She's just going to try and hold it all together. And if she pretends hard enough, then it'll be okay.
right.
Mummy, she won't believe me. Mummy, Mummy,
Just be normal! There is no Babadook!
And you could also in that regard think about her relationship to her coworker, who I don't know his name, but who's sort of kind of having this flirtatious relationship with her, and you know she might understandably think this guy's he wants to help and maybe he could, but he also wants more, and I'm not in a position to give him more, so I'm going to push him away because I can't reciprocate whatever it is that he wants out of any kind of relationship I could enter in with him right now. And so I feel like it's like she does feel stuck because what she's lacking in this is friends.
Mhm.
She doesn't have any friends. That's like what it really comes. She has coworkers. She has a family, the sister. She's got the people she cares for, but she doesn't seem to have any people that like. She doesn't have like what you would consider in like the rest of our I don't know world now, like a support network, which is usually made up of friends. And so I think like it is. Now, who knows why that is? I mean,
No time.
no time for one, but
No
also she
time.
doesn't seem to let anyone in, so there's that.
Yeah.
She's been depressed, and there's you also get this sense when she interacts with her sister's friends that at the party.
How's Richard's motor going?
Oh, good. I mean, his workload's just ballooned. I've got the kids 24/7, it feels like.
Tell me about it.
I don't even have time to go to the gym anymore. It's ridiculous.
That's a real tragedy. Not having time to go to the gym anymore. How do you cope? You must have so much to talk about with those poor disadvantaged women.
And so that makes for a challenge. Like anytime you're carrying that burden and that baggage, it's like a further hurdle to now, engaging with other people because I mean, I read them as they're assholes, obviously, but you could also read it as like, they are somewhat innocent. They're just kind of ignorant,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't really understand. And so in that moment, they're saying so stupid, ignorant things, but like they could be forgiven if, but I'm not saying that like she's a bad person for not being more magnanimous in that moment, but I'm just thinking like you get a sense that like whatever patience she would have had for that is like gone. She's just like, I have no patience for these assholes, and like, but to have friends is you have to have some patience for, because friends are going to be assholes sometimes, it's just like the name of the game. You have to like there's a give and take to any friendship. And as you put it, Laura, she's kind of like she's strung out, and she just does not have the space for that. And
Yeah.
which is unfortunate, because I think if she had some friends, it might help a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's that isolationism.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be around anyone. You can't be around anyone. No one can understand your pain. And also, you're not, it's like when you're really depressed and you're looking for a therapist, you're like, so you find one and they don't really work.
Mhm.
But it's so hard to find another one, because then you're just gonna have to tell the story all over
Yeah.
again to find out. And I don't know. I wonder about her relationship with her husband. I wonder if she had friends in the before time.
Mm.
I think that's what's so interesting about it being 7 years, is like there's so much life that has supposedly been lived in that period of time. What happened? How did she end up here? It's not like he died 18 months ago. Like this has been a chunk.
Mhm.
And I have a lot of questions about it. Laura, what do you think about the friends?
I have continued to be on Facebook because there are mom groups. And I find these mom groups incredibly helpful, but it is definitely tricky waters to navigate. This group is like, I would say on the whole, based because it's like location based, highly educated and affluent. And for the most part, two partners. For the most part, white and hetero, but not totally. But like I've watched like a lot of work being done and realize and like people sort of understanding, like when they come on there to rant about something, like maybe like, oh my God, my husband has had a work trip and like and now I can't go to the gym, which is for them something that they're going through. Right. Like, and then somebody being like, you know what? Like, I'm actually a single mom and like this drove me nuts that you wrote this, and now we're like, the group has gotten to a point where we're really careful about content warning. We're really careful about like being aware of like you talk about your second baby, there's half the people in this group that are dealing with infertility. But that's all to say that like this is an enormous amount of work to have friendships and to have support groups and to like be able to get over the humps of like something triggering you
Mm.
and being like, okay, now I have to be vulnerable and say, this is upsetting me because of this. And you didn't know that. And now I'm going to tell you. And now I'm going to teach you. It's work for everybody. And it's the kind of thing that you don't have any space for it when you're in a place that Amelia is at. So I just like, it's hard. I can really, that scene with the moms, yes, it was played in like a pretty extreme way, but also like, we're all kind of going through our own things that are sort of in different contexts might be irritating to another person, upsetting to another person. And how do we talk about our problems and also be sensitive to other people if we're not vulnerable and also sensitive and also doing the work? And that all takes a massive amount of emotional labor. Friendships are
Right.
hard too.
I think that's totally, I think that's, I am so bad at friendships. I fully admit it. I feel like I am not up to the care and feeding of friendships, because I get really weird and in my head about it. And like, it's very, there's a lot of emotional math involved, and like,
Mhm.
am I doing enough? Am I taking too much?
Mhm.
And eventually I've just been largely very like, oh, it's okay. I'll be fine. I'll be fine on my own. I have not been fine on my own. I just want to put that out there.
Side note.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. But I see where that thing is, but also like Amelia sucks. Like Amelia hasn't done any of the work.
Yeah.
She's done no work on herself. She's not tried to get a day past this. Like, so she's in this environment with normal women, which is not normal. They're just homogenized.
Yeah.
Um, and all she can see is like how that was the life she was supposed to have.
Mhm.
And now she doesn't, and it's not fair. And it's not fair that she has to be around these people. It's not fair. Like I think it's just that rage that we know is inside of her. That's just like it's a flare. It's a crack in her facade, which is what we see from the first moment of the film. Is like, is that facade finally completely breaking down
Yeah.
in the most horrifying way possible? But yeah, it's wow, this movie's a lot. Like,
Totally.
a lot.
I mean,
It is.
for me, the thing about the friendship is, and maybe what she's lacking is a kind of ability to be vulnerable, or whatever. She's not willingness to be vulnerable and trusting of another
Mhm.
person. I think that's the hardest part. And what you described, Laura, in the group is it's compounded because in a group like that, you might not know each other personally. So you're in a situation where it's like a micro version of Twitter, where if you put something
Yes.
out there, you're putting it out there to all these people simultaneously, and it's incredibly difficult to because you don't know them and they don't know you, and so there's not that kind of trust that if you know someone well, like a good friend, you might slip up, but they trust that your heart's in the right place and so on. And so they're not gonna maybe jump on you in the way that someone who doesn't know you might do so, especially in the social media setting. And so but I think that trust is what, is not there in her life. She's not sort of willing to trust that her neighbor actually has her best interests in mind. Maybe she
Right.
does, maybe she doesn't, but I don't know. Maybe the neighbor is actually a weirdo, but Amelia refuses to trust her and refuses in a way to trust that this guy, the coworker, um, might actually, maybe he does want to go on a date with her, but maybe he also just would be willing to help her for a time,
Yeah.
and there's something, I don't blame her for this. I'm not saying Amelia's at fault. I just think it's complex, and a part of that is a kind of being open to, um, you know, making mistakes and being vulnerable and forgiving, right, when they make mistakes and so on. And it's I think it's just when you're in I mean, I can't really speak generally about this, but it does feel like when you're in a very dark state of mind, it's like looking at the abyss, right? The last thing you want to do is be open and vulnerable about that state, because it feels like you're bearing the worst part of yourself to someone, and that could just be worse than just keeping it hidden. So I can totally understand why she would not want to be vulnerable, but it does seem to me that maybe that would help. I don't know. Like maybe it would help because then she would have real friends she could go to.
Or a
All of
therapist.
that's
Or a therapist. Yeah,
yeah.
of course. No, yes, of
The
course.
problem is all of that starts with sharing her story.
Yeah.
Like, if anyone wants to get to know her, they have to know that, and for them to know that, she's gonna have to tell them,
Yeah.
and she won't do it.
Yeah.
And if she won't do it, she can't be vulnerable, and she's just locked herself into her prison, and it's tragic. She needs something,
Yeah.
but she won't let herself have it.
Yeah. Maybe so we've been talking a lot about some heavy stuff. Heavy duty stuff. But Laura, do you want to mention the style, the Babadook stylings? It's a little more.
I mean, do you?
I just think this is really funny. I
Okay.
mean, I don't want to make light of I mean, look, let me preface what I'm about to say. I don't want to make light of how the seriousness of the allegory of the Babadook, but there is something just like goofy about social media that it will sometimes pick up on on something very dark and turn it into something that is kind of
Delightful.
and irreverent and glorious. And
Right.
in this case,
That Babadook is a queer icon.
yeah. So
So my understanding of
Yeah.
this, which I came very late to the game on, is that like maybe at one point somebody had a screenshot of how Babadook was filed in Netflix under like LGBTQ queer cinema.
Yeah.
Maybe this was photoshopped, maybe this was real. It's like unclear if like Netflix's algorithm just went nuts for a second or if it's real. But this is apparently the origin. Am I getting this right, Libby?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. And the meme was born. And Jennifer Kent has like talked about it before, the director and writer. She's just like, I love it. Like I love that people are doing this. I love that it's happening. I love that people are embracing it and using it to further togetherness. It's just like this is dope. I love it when the internet spills into real life and it's just stupid fun.
Yeah.
It's just the best. just the best queer icon, obviously.
It seems right though. Like I like the top hat. I don't know if it's like an Oscar Wilde thing or like because he's so dapper, right? Is that what's going on? He's so dapper. Yeah, like
And
I just
also,
you put
like,
some rainbows behind him and you're just like, yes, that's exactly what he is.
absolutely have the Babadook LGBTQ slipcover.
Wait,
That
what?
someone, I think Shout was, oh God, I don't even know where it is anymore. Yeah, I feel like Shout was selling a version of the Babadook with an LGBTQ rainbow slipcover.
That's amazing. Oh my god.
I'll find it.
Oh
I'll
my
find a
gosh.
picture of it.
That's so cool.
But yeah, yeah. So we stand a queen in our house.
Well,
and
movements like the queer movement and any kind of reclamation movement, which creates solidarity around trauma and and like oppression and horrible things, is like there is something valuable in taking the darkness, the thing that like somebody's hurling an insult, they're calling you queer, and you're like, screw that. I'm going to reclaim this, right? And we're going to take these symbols which are used to hurt us and turn them against you, and show that they can't do that. And it's something similar with the Babadook, right? He's supposed to be a representation of like grief and depression and anxiety, and we're gonna like turn him into this.
And never all of a sudden people are like, wait, he's cute as hell.
Yeah, he's cute and he's fuzzy and and like maybe that's not obviously a substitute for actual therapy, but it is like there's something cool, I think, about doing that. And I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, but maybe it is just being like, hey, let's find some new vocabulary and valences to talk about really horrible things in a way, right? Like, here's this thing. Now we can just have the Babadook, and now it will be forever associated in my mind. Like the Babadook looking fresh and feeling shitty sometimes, and then maybe there is some kind of process that is actually helpful to some people. I don't know, but I think it's cool that what was really cool about it, honestly, I don't know about that part, but what was really cool is that it was like a collective movement, that like people came together and they were like doing it together, and it was spontaneous and it just happens. Like that's when the internet is a good place, and I'm so happy that things like this happen, like even as as recent as just a few years ago, right? Because all we tend to hear about the internet is like pylons and shit happening, and people getting yelled at, and it's like it sucks.
The internet was good to the Babadook because it was a Kickstarter program campaign too. So the internet brought Babadook into being and then celebrated him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like it's the exact antidote to the movie's problem. It's people coming together over this one thing. They're completely unrelated, but they're celebrating this one thing. They're finding connection in something unconnected, and yet building this community of support around some ridiculous joke. And that's how we save each other, is like finding each other in the dark. And so it's very fitting, I think, that to have that spring up around this film that is so associated with isolation.
I love that. That's great.
I think this has been like clear as we've been talking about all the way through, but this is a woman-centric film. It's directed by a woman. Has large, I mean, there's two male characters and it's a chamber piece, but it's about a woman. And in horror movies that are often about women suffering for our entertainment value, women suffering in a way that's exploitative, like this is about a woman who is doing some real life suffering that many women go through, and coming out the other side of it. Yeah. And I think like, this movie, it really spoke to me, and just like the difficulty of like trying to figure, and the difficulty in having like multiple feelings at the same time, like trying to grieve for your dead husband and also like be happy about having a child and experiencing his joy and like seeing him for who he is and all his complexity, good and bad. Like that's something that I feel like you just feel like when you have a kid, you're supposed to feel like it's like your whole world and your whole thing, and you're supposed to feel happy, and you're not allowed to have any of the other stuff. It just doesn't, people will allow it for like 5 weeks. They call it the baby blues. And then after that, like, get over it. you know?
Yeah, as opposed to it being a clinical, very serious situation that can last months or years, or which does not even mention like dealing with the effects of like the physical effects on your body, which
Yeah.
can cause their own after effects. Yeah, Kent is really, it feels like touching the third rail with this because it's talking about unacceptable things, which is like women having issues with their children and women being bad mothers,
Yep.
and these altogether unacceptable things that society holds, um, that shames women who are struggling into not speaking out. So yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on.
It's like a sympathetic portrayal of a woman going through some shit in which she's not, I think, primarily intended to be depicted as someone as an object of pity or right. You're supposed to have a very complex relationship with her, just as she has a complex relationship with her son, and that kind of thing. Let me give you an example by contrast. So, I don't know where you stand, Libby, on the Andrew Dominic film Blonde, but Blonde, I feel like, is a portrayal of female suffering, which is just intended to portray her as an object to be pitied, and it has very little of a nuanced understanding of her as a human being and as a character. And that was one of the reasons I was incredibly disappointed with the film. Is it just lacked any kind of nuance for portraying a woman whose life was incredibly nuanced. And she has so many facets to her life and her personality that just none of that came across. Maybe it's a little bit here and there, but I feel like just by contrast, this film has a woman going through some shit, but like it's a complex portrayal. Like she has all the complexity of the quote unquote anti-hero man, right? Who's now dominated our pop culture lives for like the last decade, who's like both kind of a jerk, but also sympathetic and is like, charismatic, but also going through various things and dealing with his traumas. And I feel like this is the rare portrayal of that in a woman, which is like obviously women to undergo that same level of complexity, and yet we get so few in. I mean, I don't know if that's right, but there just generally seem to be fewer portrayals of it in pop culture.
I think that is right. I think we have a hard time, society has a hard time with unpleasant women, difficult women, whatever term you want to put on it. It's messy, and people don't like mess unless you're going to show the inside of Marilyn Monroe's vagina twice in the future. I don't know. I just like the Andrew Dominic stuff really hurts me because like the assassination of Jesse James is one of my favorite movies. And so I'm just like, I don't want this. I don't want this. This is no. It's a big pass for me.
Anyway, I'm sorry to have brought up Blonde, but it was just on the mind,
No,
and just in
Yeah.
terms of similar
of course.
portrayals, and you can just it's. I mean, like I don't want to like gender essentialize here, but I'm like, this is why you could just feel that this film's directed by a woman, and that film's directed by men, and it just like that's not because there's some essential difference here, but it's just like the lived experiences of these individuals are clearly very different. And that's what's like focusing their minds in terms of what they think is interesting and what they want to focus on in telling these stories. Um, and I will say, much prefer the more nuanced portrayal that I'm getting in Jennifer Kent with the Babadook. Yeah, apologize for bringing a Blonde to just ruin the evening.
I will say there is another women directed film coming up that feels so much like 110% like it was directed by a woman, and it's actually Women Talking by Sarah Polley. It'll be out in the next couple months. It's amazing. It's an adaptation of a best-selling novel about these women who live in a religious compound who discover that the men in the compound have been sexually abusing them and drugging them in their sleep, and they have to decide what to do. So they have a meeting over 2 days.
Awesome.
Then that's the movie.
Was
amazing.
it Take This Waltz that she did? I'm just trying to look this up.
Yes.
Oh, I
Yes.
thought that
With
was.
like Seth Rogen,
Seth Rogen
and Michelle
and
Williams.
Michelle
I thought that
Williams.
movie was excellent, and
Oh, she's great. She's so
yeah,
good.
That movie, I think about that movie all the time.
yeah. Just talk about a complex portrayal of a relationship from the woman's perspective.
Yeah.
But wait, I
She's so
can't
great.
find her filmography.
Along that, while you're looking for it, Jess, one like it's not particularly spot on, but one sort of reading you might have too of the Babadook that I thought about, because you mentioned Libby wondering what Amelia's relationship was with Oscar before he died. Like, there's also too the grieving of a loss of your previous relationship before you had children too. Like, it, there's like there is an Amelia that is gone forever.
Mhm.
And there was an Amelia and Oscar that is gone forever. And even if Oscar had not died in a car crash, like that part, that like, just things sort of irrevocably change over time. And particularly, I think when you bring a kid into the world and deal with all of the drudgery and minutia that is that. Sorry that I'm like, is this weird that I'm talking to you, my husband, about like on mic about like the fact that there is like, I was just thinking about like there's so much made of like her watching people kiss.
Yes.
And
yes.
She's lonely, but also like there was like a sexual Amelia that she has no energy for anymore, right? There was a romantic Amelia that like no time, right? This guy shows up on her door of flowers and she's like, you gotta go.
Also she's watching not just German Expressionism, this reminds me, she's watching these romance movies
She's
from
watching,
like the 40s or whatever.
Yeah. And there's just like a lot of her like sort of staring at people kissing and and like, of course she's deeply lonely, but I think you can also be lonely in a monogamous relationship with with a kid too.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's like she misses intimacy, and I think that's natural. And like there are a lot of things can happen in a relationship that leaves a person grieving a former version of their spouse, or a former version of your dynamic, or there are a lot of things that can happen, and it's important to recognize those things and discuss them. But Amelia has no one to discuss them with, but to a certain extent of her own choosing. But that's what happens when you lose a spouse. Like, when you're dealing with the struggles of your relationship changing after a newborn, like, you can talk through that. But she just didn't have anyone to talk to, and so she didn't, and then it just kept perpetuating. It was a huge bummer.
I don't think we should stay here tonight. I can call Mrs. Roach.
I don't want you to call anyone. I just need to sleep.
Mom.
Leave it!
Given that, Libby, you're about to have a baby and be a mom, do you have like other recommendations? I know this might be putting you on the spot, but do you have other like recommendations of like, the horrors of motherhood movies? Because there are some like, or fatherhood, or the horrors of parenthood. Because it is like a kind of interesting little micro genre of films that, there seems to be. I mean, a lot of people become parents, and so it's like evergreen that they go through all of this. It's not all trauma; it's all great too. But like, there's dimensions of it that are not great, and it's ripe for kind of unhappiness and terror and feeling trapped and all these things that the Babadook is exploring, and it brings out and often exacerbates existing depression or anxiety or negative thinking, and so it's also ripe for that kind of psychological horror. I mean, I guess also you could think of like, if there are other films which you might think are like could be read as allegories for the horrors of parenthood, but maybe aren't explicitly. Anyway, I was curious if you had recommendations for the audience.
there's the interesting thing about that is there's that, and then there's the subgenre of horror films about pregnancy, which is like
Yes.
every body horror film.
Yes.
Um, and then I'm thinking of that because of that. Then I'm thinking of Prometheus, which, oof, and yeah, I try not to think about Prometheus. But okay, so I'm terrible at on the spot stuff, so I googled, and I'm not going to list all of these, but the ones that really jump out to me are Goodnight Mommy, which came out 2014, the same year as
Mm.
Babadook, is mess you up real good. And I suggest watching the original. I think they just did a remake of it, and it is not as good. It's a foreign film for people out there, just so you know. So there is some reading involved.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, I know. But it is it is. I feel like it has similar themes in that of not being able to trust. There's a lack of trust between parent and child
Mhm.
that causes uh, complications and horror. Um, and then I have to. I'm gonna list another one that I actually haven't seen, but the reason I haven't seen it is because I read the book and
Mm.
it messed me up so bad that now, especially now that I'm having a child, like I just can't. And that's We Need to Talk About Kevin,
Yeah.
which yeah, like I just don't think anyone. I That's like my nightmare. Like like I think yeah, that Lynn Ramsey messed me up good, and I think the film would even further because Tilda, I'm sure, is great in that role, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah,
is
those are my big ones.
Good,
it's
Rex.
a good one, and that I thought about. I mean, it's probably best that you don't watch it, like me, because I thought about We Need to Talk About Kevin a lot in the early years. Having I when I first, I thought I would like have this like mother instinct, and I would just be like, oh, cool, 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 and then the baby would, I
Mhm,
read all the books, and I was like, I know how to
mhm,
swaddle, so that would be great. And he
right.
screamed a lot because he had colic, but I felt like it was like personal in a way, and I thought like he hated me. I like that's how and I was just like, "Oh my god, we're immediately at odds." And I don't either I'm sufficient as a mother or like there's something in like or there's insufficient as a mother or like there's something broken in him. And I remember like that was the postpartum depression talking. I remember like we went in at the 5-week check-in to be like, "I'm not having a good time" to my midwife, and I told her I was like, "I think my baby hates me." And she's like, "Your baby does not hate you." Like she was just looking at me like, "Nope. That's a red flag thought. Uh, that's not what's happening, but that's how I felt. Like I was like, I have a Kevin on my hands and he hates me."
Oh, I'm actually kind of ahead of again, I'm ahead of the game. I went in for my 8 months checkup, and I told my OBGYN that I thought my baby hated me, because she doesn't respond when I talk to her. She, like, isn't active, like, she doesn't like music or when I sing to her, and she just doesn't I just don't think she likes me, and I said, "I know that is a warning sign. I know that is not what you want an 8 months pregnant woman coming into your office and telling you. I know that is not a normal thought." So I get it. And I think it's hard because you do read all the books, and then with the books all say a certain thing, then you're like, okay, well this has to happen this way because it's in the book. And if it doesn't happen that way, then you're like, I messed up. Like, how did I mess up? Like, what is happening now? And the truth is, it's a little person. It's a little person with their own ideas about the world or their own gastrointestinal system, and they're gonna scream because they don't know how to do anything else. But yeah, I can't imagine wrapping my head around that. And I've been trying very hard to like not put us at odds with each other, considering she's not even here yet. But like, it's wild. It's a very unique dynamic pregnancy is, and I hate how it's always men trying to like talk about that weird intimacy in a relationship. Like I don't know. I love Rosemary's Baby, but also uh you know what is it, like, it's just a complicated thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's so unique and like isolatingly odd.
The word isolating really, like, popped out
Yeah.
to me too because it is isolating and yet also, like, all of a sudden, like, you feel like any other pregnant lady, like, you're like, "Oh, hello, you have one too?" And then, like, or people, like, start touching you in the grocery store as if, like, you're all of a sudden a part of their community or, like, you're expected to, like, yeah, get, like, inducted into the secret club or, like, commune with other women that are going through something, and they're going through something physically, like, very similar to what you're going through, but also we're all in our own little pods going through whatever we're
Oh,
going
yeah.
through
Yeah.
mentally and physically because 'cause we're all having a very different experience of it. Yeah, it's a strange both and.
I'm also running into the further complication is like I am short and squat and I'm kind of built like a fire plug. So no one knows I'm pregnant. And I'm like I'm 6 weeks out at this point and like no one mentions anything. They're like, "Oh, you're pregnant." Cuz they're all polite and they just think it's pandemic weight. But so then I'm like, "Oh, I'm not really pregnant." Like no one
I
notices that I'm
see.
pregnant, so I'm
Mhm.
not really pregnant.
Mm.
So it's this constant I don't know. I wonder if my mom had to deal with this because like it feels like it's a perpetuation of sort of the mommy sort of like the community we're trying to foster, the community we're trying to seek out, but also the community that we really would like to fit into, so we feel normal. Um,
It's hard. It's really hard. And especially, I think, like, forming friends around something like that you're just kind of in the same life stage at the same time. It's helpful, but also, like, I found that weird
Yeah.
to go to, like, the library baby time and be like, "Oh, yours is 6 months, mine is 6 months. We had birth at the same time. Do you want to be friends?" Like, like,
I know that's why
Yeah,
I'm
we have
so glad.
nothing
Like we
else in
have
common.
some natural friends who have like all reproduced within the last like little chunk of time. So we'll have people like you guys who are veterans who can walk us through those toddlers. We have a couple of friends who had babies like a year ago, and
Mhm.
like it's just stages, and we'll be fine
Yeah,
probably.
totally.
It'll
you're
all
gonna
be
be great.
it'll
No,
be fine.
totally.
After
Yeah.
we just talked
Oh
about
god.
the horrors of it, like, you're you're gonna
No,
be
to
great.
but
Oh, I know.
we're confronting it, right? We're
Yeah.
not shying away. We're confronting the complexity and the both the there are not that many pros in this movie, but all the bad parts of it we're seeing it head on and understanding it, and I think that will make that makes us better positioned than Amelia to deal with the inevitable ups and
Exactly.
downs of the experience. And so, um, on that note, Libby, thank you very much for joining us. And
Thank you for having me. This was such a lovely time. I really appreciate it.
we really appreciate having you. And can you tell the folks at home if you're interested? Just the writing is at the Wrap. Your writing is at the
Yeah.
Wrap. And what's your Twitter handle? Do you wanna put it out there?
Yeah, that's fine. My Twitter handle is Midwest Spitfire, all one word.
Thank you very much, Libby. And
Oh, thank you.
we will be back in 2 weeks talking about another sort of horror family movie, Dogtooth, with Jack Draper from Exiting Through the 2010s podcast. So look forward to that. And you can find us on the web at cowspod.wordpress.com. We are at cowspod on Twitter. And if you, for some reason, want to buy a shirt either with Werner Herzog's head on it or 2 cows on it, you can find that at cowspod.threadless.com. Thanks everyone for listening. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.